A memorable day for some of us. We were out betimes, and soon had the coffee kettle simmering and the pork sizzling. We had our grub, and then laid around awaiting orders. A portion of Franklin's corps was engaged with the enemy over the river, and we were ordered across to support them, not knowing whether the entire Grand Division was there or not. Great was our surprise, as we emerged from the woods and came in sight of the river, to see no less than 4 lines of troops lying on the ground, while a comparatively small force engaged the enemy. We pushed over the river and moved up the old stage road to Richmond, and came to a front near a fine residence, the Barnard house. On the side of the road, next the house, and in lieu of a fence were an embankment and a ditch. We couldn't take advantage of them then, although under severe fire, for we had something else to do. The small force sent over earlier by General Franklin had accomplished prodigies of valor and had pierced Lee's lines. At that moment, had it been supported by another division, there is no doubt a lodgment could have been effected, but they looked in vain for support and were compelled to fall back. As they neared our group at the old stage, or river road, the rebels in hot pursuit, we came to a front and fixed bayonets. As soon as the Pennsylvania bucktails who were in front of us cleared out, we charged on the advancing Southrons, giving them a volley as we moved. Shot and shell fire flew in all directions, reminding us of what an old man once said under similar circumstances. "Cedar, hell has laid an egg." We were soon the recipients of as many of these favors, or eggs, as we could attend to, and they kept us ducking and dodging in a lively and bewildering manner. The first in our company to receive an injury was Sergeant John Libby. A fragment of shell smashed his hip. He took it coolly and patiently, although judging from the nature of the wound it must have been very painful. He smiled and tried to appear unconcerned, but it was a ghastly effort. He was carried to a brick house in rear of us used as a hospital. We were in the immediate presence of death. One in our company, when a shell burst near the head of our regiment, supposing it was a Union shell fallen short, exclaimed, "I should think they could get a better aim than that." Another, who saw the gun on the rebel side that fired it, replied, "You devilish fool. I should think it was good enough." At the same time, he bowed very low to escape pieces flying around our heads. No harm was done, beyond a slight breaking of the ranks. Our regiment formed in the road to dispute the further progress of Johnny Reb. The first volley from our guns compensated somewhat for the havoc the rebels had made in the ranks of the bucktails, who were now thoroughly demoralized. They were out of ammunition and forced to fall back and save themselves, if possible. There was no order in the manner of their coming off. Each was taking his own time and motion. Some, with broken legs, were carried on the shoulders of others who had been hit in the head or otherwise disabled. But for such timely assistance from their comrades, many must have been left on the field to the mercy of an exultant foe. Our arrival was opportune, and quickly showed Mr. Johnny that in the matter of charging, 2 could play the game. Our regiment is larger than many old brigades in both armies, and when we blazed away, we made a hole visible a long way off, as in the case of the Georgia Regiment. The dozen or so left must have wondered what struck them: earthquake, tornado, or lightning. Our regimental loss was 20. Company I lost 1. We were now ordered to lie down, but not willingly, as we had more curiosity than fear and wanted to see what was going on. General Barry paced back and forth in the rear of us, an old slouched hat pulled over his eyes. He ordered us to keep down out of sight and out of range. "Boys, don't expose yourselves any more than you can help. You'll have a chance to see all you want to. The state of Maine is looking at you and expects every man to do his duty today." This little speech stirred us wonderfully, way down to the bottom of our boots, making us wish we were back at home. Some of us still stood up and tried to peer into the rebel lines, whereupon General Barry ordered, "Lay down, men, lay down. I am here to take care of you, and I'll do it if you will let me and will obey my orders." After things settled and there was no immediate prospect of an attack, we took a position in rear of the embankment by the side of the road. This was a judicious move, as it gave us protection, and at the same time a good range. The Rebs spotted us and commenced a lively cannonade, which hastened our move. Strangely, not a man in our company was hit in passing through this storm of shot and shell, but there were some hairbreadth escapes, not soon forgotten. We laid here till about 4 p.m., when there were indications of rebel movement. We moved to the front and formed ahead of a battery somewhat to the left of our first position. This was a rifled battery, and it sent its missiles with horrible force. If the rebels had known what was there, they'd have looked before they leapt. We hadn't long to wait, as the rebels commenced to cannonade our lines about 4:30, preparatory to a charge. Our battery replied, and shells went whizzing over us so near that we hugged old Mother Earth most affectionately. There was a single gun nearly opposite belonging to Stuart's horse artillery and under command of Major John Pelham. This conceited party must have thought he could silence our battery. His was a large gun and threw a much heavier missile. Our gunners ceased firing for a minute, and never was 60 seconds better employed. They sighted and fired. That shell created a profound sensation in rebel circles. It burst exactly under Mr. Pelham's gun, and not only dismantled the same, but mixed things up dreadfully. 2 men and a boy were killed by that one shell. It wasn't necessary to duplicate the dose. The indefatigable Pelham, the incomparable Pelham, and the rest of his crew made great haste to depart. No more cannonading that day. Nor did the rebels make the contemplated charge in which they had, no doubt, expected to capture our forces or drive us into the Rappahannock. This was one instance of Stonewall Jackson's timidity. It is said he stood with his watch in his hand, counting the minutes till the sun went down, and then put it up and relinquished his design. A curious ending for so promising a movement. The rebels probably cannot understand it. I do. That cannonading probably reminded him of the costly and fruitless charge his command made at Malvern Hill last June, when they were mowed down by the hundreds. Night soon settled over the scene of carnage, and after getting something to eat we laid on the ground, but not to sleep. Our ears are continually saluted with the cries of the wounded left on the field to the mercy of weather and rebels, their sufferings heightened by cold and thirst. Who can depict such horrors? These wretched men lay crying, groaning, and begging for water and help in the most agonizing manner, and we unable to rescue them. The rustle of a leaf or the crackling of a twig might send a shower of rebel bullets into our ranks. We had an illustration of this soon after settling down. Something caused the pickets to commence firing, and it increased to such an extent that it was feared a general engagement might be the result. We got up and packed our things and put our knapsacks up in front of our heads as a breastwork, much like the ostrich hiding its head and leaving the rest of its carcass exposed. We learned better the longer we stayed in the show. I was mortally scared and could not imagine what I should do on picket on such a night. It is a dreadful night, even for old and tried soldiers. A reconnoitering party passed along our front about the time the row was ending. Although close to our line, and with the pickets in front, one of this group displayed the most ridiculous fright. He dodged and ducked in a most comical manner. Each time, this affected the others. The officer in command of the squad drew his revolver and threatened to transfer its contents to the fellow's head. This proved to be a good remedy for the soldier's nerves. After this I tried to rest, but no sleep could be obtained, listening to the wounded and unable to help. Their fate, or a worse one, might be mine before another sunset. How fortunate for the peace of mind of the women of our land that they do not know all these things. In giving their sons and brothers to such a cause, how little they know what they are doing. The peculiar feature of war is that each expects someone else to fall. The horrors are not mitigated by the rebels who, it is said, stripped our dead and wounded and left them to suffer. It is hard to credit this, for I believe the rebels are human, but such acts are diabolical. One cannot blame them. To bury a good suit of Union clothes when they are nearly naked in winter would seem foolish. The system of African slavery that has prevailed here so long has, no doubt, destroyed much of the finer sensibilities of the Southern people, even of the better class. But that institution is fast approaching its end. This day has been a most exciting and eventful one. It was our regiment's first experience under fire, and a whole lifetime has been crowded into it. It was expected that we should show the white feather. This formed no part of our plan. Still, no man can tell as he sits in the chimney corner whether he is a brave man or a coward. In accordance with this belief, a couple of New York regiments were placed in rear of us to keep us in line. But, horrible to relate, our gallant support soon struck out and left us to do as we chose. All efforts of their officers were utterly unavailing, and they fled from the presence of the enemy. On the contrary, Our regiment behaved so well it merited the encomiums of General Barry.